Begin the keynote session on a theme that could not be more timely or relevant, that is, educating better humans to thrive alongside smart machines. I would request all the awardees to kindly take their seats in the front row. We are ready to go ahead with the keynote session. Investing in critical thinking, metacognition, empathy, teamwork, and creativity to ensure that future generations thrive, not compete alongside smart machines. And it is my great privilege to invite on stage our distinguished keynote speaker, Lord Jim Knight. He's chair of the Board Council of British International Schools. I would also invite on stage Ms. Silpi Sahu, Vice President Arise, to do the honors of welcoming and honoring our distinguished keynote speaker with a green certificate and a shawl. Ladies and gentlemen, Lord Knight is a globally respected voice on international schooling and assessment. He currently serves as a non-executive chair of leading education boards, including EACT, Multi-Academy Trust, Council of British International Schools, Century Tech, and STEM Learning Limited. He is also a member of the Pearson Qualifications Committee and advises globally renowned education organizations such as Node Anglia Education, DGA, Public Affairs, and Good Notes Edwin Group and Blackboard. In public services, he held ministerial portfolios in schools, digital rural affairs and employment, and was member of the Honourable Prime Minister Gordon Brown's cabinet before joining the UK House of Lords in 2010, where he continues to contribute as a Privy Councillor and member of the Communications and Digital Committee. I would request Ms. Silpi Sahu, Vice President Arise, to kindly do the honors of welcoming our distinguished keynote speaker with a green certificate and a shawl. And ladies and gentlemen, please join me in warmly welcoming Lord Jim Knight to deliver the keynote address.
Thank you very much indeed for that very warm welcome, and thank you so much for inviting me to Delhi to come and talk to you. Now, I'm hoping I might have a clicker so I can wander around or control the slides, but if that's forthcoming, that would be helpful at some point. Look, let me start by introducing myself. You've heard my CV, that's all lovely. And I'm lucky enough to have done various things in a career over the last 18 years or so since Tony Blair, then Prime Minister, asked me to be schools minister. And so I had 3 glorious years doing that. And I now enjoy my time in the House of Lords trying to legislate and make policy around schools, around skills, and around technology. And those are the things that I want to focus on today. I also chair the Council of British International Schools, and I'm happy to talk to any of you about the work that we're doing here in India, where, amongst other things, we're looking to open up a new category of membership of COBIS so that people can take advantage of our professional development, can take advantage of our accreditation system to help your schools increase their quality further, to be able to access teaching international GCSE and so on and so forth. But I won't labour the point, but I'm here if people want to talk about that opportunity. What I then wanted to do, and here's a clicker, this is very helpful. What I then wanted to do was start with an experiment. I've not done this before. This requires a certain amount of risk-taking, so I want you to bear with me. We are all somewhat addicted to our phones. And that's something that I want to talk about in the context of children in a short while. But whilst I'm getting to that point in my talk, I want to ask you, first of all, put up your hands. Hold up for me if you've got a mobile phone in your hand right now. Okay. So the experiment I want you to indulge me in, until I tell you otherwise, is to put your phone away and see how long we can last without you then being distracted and touching your phones. Let's see how we get on with that as I carry on talking. I think in the context of what we are here to talk about at this conference, it's really important to start with thinking about what is the purpose of schooling. What is schooling actually for? And I'm offering you 3 alternatives. In my country, and I think last year you heard from my friend Nick Gibb, who followed me as schools minister and served a much longer term as schools minister than I ever did. But my guess is, I wasn't here, but my guess is Nick will have talked to you about the importance of knowledge acquisition. He'd have gone for the middle one. But that was with a view towards what was important for particularly disadvantaged pupils in being able to then access university. And in many ways, in my country certainly, we have a schooling system that is geared around the needs of university admissions. It's geared around the academic learning that people need to pass the exams set by wonderful people like Cambridge and others, to then qualify them for getting into university. And my guess is that many of your parents, in the end, when push comes to shove, what they're buying from you for their children is access to higher education. Is that the purpose of schooling? I don't think so. But that's what is driving the culture in most of our schools, and that is a problem. Is it knowledge acquisition? When we talk about the point of schooling, in many cases we go straight to learning. And when we think about learning, we think about knowledge, and we think about all of the very important cognitive development that we get from learning. It's fundamentally important that children learn how to read. It's a tragedy at the moment in my country that the numbers of children who are reading books is declining rapidly. Learning how to read, learning numeracy, these are really, really fundamental parts of the purpose of schooling. The question is that it? Is knowledge acquisition all that schooling is about, or do we want to go further? My view is we need to go further. So my view is that the purpose of schooling, in the end, is human development. It is developing every child to become the best human they can possibly be. And that humanity is not defined just by brain. It is defined by both hand and heart, as well as head. It is our whole personality that we are looking to develop, and there could never be a more important time for that than now. Because now we are living at a time of intelligent machines, and where our competitive advantage over those machines, competing with us in the workplace in particular, is as humans. And if we've not been developed to be better humans, then as people we have a problem. And we are not preparing our people well. So there is a dilemma for us when we're running schools in terms of what parents want. They want success for their children. They want them to do well academically. They want them to access those universities. But to an extent, we're caught because we only have a certain amount of time. There are only a certain number of hours in the day. There are only a certain number of days in the week. And so we're caught between this conflict of doing everything we can to get them to pass the tests. And in the end, we let the other things go. In the end, we let the sport go. We let the arts go. We let all of the things that we're doing to develop the wider human skills go in pursuit of what's needed to sit in a large sports hall on a hot day with a paper and pen and recall the knowledge that we've been taught in school. But that's to an extent what parents want until their children have a problem. And one thing that we are experiencing in my country, in the UK, is a catastrophic rise in mental health problems amongst young people. We, this week, had a children's plan launched by the Children's Commissioner for the UK, Rachel de Souza. And what Rachel said is in widespread surveying of children in the UK is that over half of our secondary school children don't enjoy going to school. That's terrible. That is terrible, that they're spending their time in a place that they don't enjoy. They're not enjoying their learning. That is no preparation for their future if they don't love learning. And so parents know that. What parents in the end want, I believe, is for their children to do well in tests so that they can show off at dinner parties. They want their children to get a job at the end of the whole endeavor of education, because in the end they don't really want them living at home for their adult lives. There comes a point when you do want an empty nest so you can go and do some other things and explore the world and have fun. And they don't want to have a battle with them every morning to get them out of bed, on the bus and into school. 3 things, simple, and yet we're struggling. And I'm framing this around the child today who starts school age 5 and who's leaving school in 2038. And to an extent, our impossible job as educators designing schooling is to try and imagine what they need in 2038, when change is happening so rapidly in our societies, in our communities, in our countries. And so it's very hard for us to predict what the world will be like in 2038, but we know it will be really different to what it is now. And what I would say to you as someone who was a UK government minister for 5 years, from 2005 to 2010, roughly the time when the people leaving school this year started school, was, I think, we failed to properly anticipate the changes that are happening. We failed to understand the world that we're living in now. And what I'm seeing around the world is the rise of anger amongst people, the rise of populist politics, the rise of mis and disinformation online, the rise of a challenging of truth. And in part, that is because we failed to anticipate the changes that are happening now when we were educating children through the noughties and the last decade, whatever we call that, the teenies or something. And what I would argue is that every year that we fail to change is a year we're storing up problems for ourselves in the future. And then I want to just dwell for a moment on 3 things that I think are the forces that we need to think about when we're thinking about 2038. And I'll come on to the ones we're always talking about, which are AI and, to an extent, what I call the weapons of mass distraction that are smartphones. And, you know, I've mentioned smartphones, and those of you who managed to stick to keeping your phones away are probably now really twitching, because I've said phones. And so you're going, oh, yeah, what's that message? That has anyone replied? And I posted that on LinkedIn, and you know, has anyone liked it? And now that he's saying all of that, I really want to look at my phone because it's reminded me of all the other things that might be going on my phone. And those are the distractions that we're dealing with every day as addicted adults. But I'll come back to that. I want to start with the longevity revolution. This is a really positive thing that is happening in our countries and in our societies, is that we are living longer. It presents challenges. You know, we have a big challenge in my country that we're living much older. We're costing our health service a lot more, We've got fewer people working as a proportion of the population paying in the taxes to pay for those health services, and the whole of the model of the welfare state is becoming very challenged. But it is really positive that we're living longer. This is a result of the ingenuity of humanity, some great technology, some really hard work from healthcare professionals, and some pretty good public health. You know, in my country, we pretty much banned smoking everywhere, as an example. But the fact that we're living longer is something we have to think about for that 5-year-old starting school. The chances are, in my country, the 5-year-old, there's a fair chance they'll live to be 100. Now, if they've got a 100-year life, then what does that mean for when they might retire? Do we have a design of a pension system that would allow them to retire and have 30 years living off that pension? Probably not, is the truth. Probably the child of 5 will have to work until they're 75. And then maybe we could have a pension scheme that allows them 25 years dignity in retirement. If they're working till they're 75 and they've got a 50 or 60-year working life, they're doing that in an environment where technology is going to be de-skilling and reskilling them constantly. So what we're looking at is the end of the 3-stage life. The 3-stage life is where we do education, then we do work, and then we do retirement. That is over. The reality of what we need to design education for is a world where we start learning and we learn full-time, and then we carry on learning until the day we die. And when we're working, we're learning. And we might cycle in and out of formal education through our working lives in order to pivot our education in our working life in order to be able to develop new skills. But we have to design for that. So we have to design in a love of learning and a resilience to change, because if I'm 40 and suddenly most of my work has been made redundant by AI or quantum or whatever plasma, whatever the next technology is that's come along, and I think, well, I'm on the scrap heap, I'm just going to sit at home and do whatever I need to do to survive, but you know, I'm unemployable because of age discrimination, because I feel too old, because the technology isn't for me. That's a disaster. It's a disaster for me personally, but it's a disaster for everybody else, because we then have millions and millions of people who are not paying in and they're drawing out of community and society. So we have to inculcate in our children, when they're in school, an absolute love of learning and an ability to cope with change and to respond to change and to bounce back from change. And I'm not sure that we do that at the moment. I think we are educating in an environment where we give people the model answer for the test, they get them to remember the model answer, and then they're a bit freaked out if the question is questioned wrongly in the test because they don't know whether that fits their model answer anymore. That's not resilience. It's the opposite of resilience. Second, I've touched on, and you can get your phones out now, just relax about it, the weapons of mass distraction. We are all addicted to these things. They are affecting our well-being. There's a sentence here, the value of boredom. Last week, I was really struck by listening to a 5-minute talk by a Harvard professor on the importance of boredom. Look it up, you'll find it, and it's on my LinkedIn profile, so you'll find it there. And what he's saying is, we're losing the ability to just sit with ourselves, to sit in our own heads, to reflect on whatever's coming into our heads and make sense of it. We're constantly having to be fed content. We are constantly having to be online. We're constantly having to communicate. We're constantly having to comment. We have to share everything. Why the hell do we have to share everything? What's happened to privacy? What's happened to my own thoughts? But if we don't develop in our children the ability to reflect, the ability to just take time to think critically, to have new ideas, to be inspired, then we've got a problem. We're not equipping them properly for the world and for life. We're not equipping them properly for work. Who wants to employ someone who can't think of a new idea? If we're employing people who think that coming up with a new idea is to ask ChatGPT, then well, we might as well have employed a machine. You know, I've done loads of work on online safety in the UK Parliament. I've devoted the last 4 years of my life to it. I've met too many families with, where they've lost children to suicide thanks to what they've been fed on social media, who've been victims of self-harm, who are victims of bullying in school because of the 24/7 pervasive power of social media and the content of mobile phones. It is shaping our children's minds. And I'm not saying we shouldn't have phones. I'm not one of those people who are saying we should ban phones, but I am saying we need to be discreet about how we use it. And then AI, look, I won't bang on about AI because we've been talking about AI the whole of this conference, but I am concerned about cognitive offloading. I'm concerned that we are forgetting to teach people how to think when they are relying on AI on how to think. I'm worried about the misinformation that can be created so easily and so instantly in the way that I created this presentation instantly with Gamma. I'm worried about the impact on the labour market in terms of the jobs, and we need to get ready for that and be positive in the end about what it can do for us whilst being mindful of what the dangers are. And so there are opportunities. There are opportunities for personalization. We've talked about all of these. I was at Naga's wonderful session yesterday. Real-time assessment and feedback, adapting the curriculum. I'm particularly excited about what it can do for assessment with the possibility, perhaps, that one day we'll be able to change university admissions. If we could change university admissions because we equip our schools and our young people with a digital portfolio that they can put everything that they're doing in, not just their tests, and then if they choose to, share access to their portfolio to a university admissions officer or to an employer so that they can then get their AI to look at the portfolio and work out whether or not that individual is going to work out. It would be a far more effective way of working out the potential of an individual to be a success at university or in that job than a bunch of test certificates. One day we might be able to move to that, and that would transform our whole schooling system and our education system. So as I say here, technology is not the enemy, but it's the way that we could really revolutionize the nurturing of human potential. So our children need knowledge, yes, fundamental. But equally, we've got to allow time for them to apply that knowledge in the real world and use it to solve problems. We need them to be physically fit so that they can live long, healthy lives and learn how to be physically literate, digitally literate, AI literate. Really important now, media literacy. I've done a bunch of work on that this year around being able to critically think about the content that is flooding through our phones. Being resilient to change, and in the end, being empathetic, not just to each other as humans. You know, this is the most populous country on the planet. If we don't educate the children of India to be empathetic to nature too, then their future is going to be really problematic. So those are my 5 things in terms of what I think children actually need. And there are things that we can do right now around that. We can use our discretion in the local curriculum to adapt content to our local needs and future skills. We can Train teachers, take advantage of professional development, give them new pedagogic skill. You know, we know from the work of Ruben Puentedora and others that unless your use of technology is allowed to redefine your pedagogy, then the chances are it's not going to make any difference. And we have to allow time for our teachers to be trained and to be confident to do that. Project-based qualifications like the HPQ, the EPQ, the FPQ, like the IB's careers program, those are really important in allowing children to find their passions and learn to their passions so that they develop that love of learning, they develop what we need for them to thrive. Embrace AI in a strategic, deliberate, and ethical way so that we can enhance the workforce. And at times, we might need to be able to remodel the workforce. In my country, you can't get a physics teacher for love nor money. And maybe we can use the technology to help us with physics delivery, to help magnify the impact of the human physics teachers that we do have. And finally, I've mentioned digital portfolio systems already. I think they are fundamental as things that we can get on with now. So my challenge to you is to say, change is happening. It's happening outside our schools. It needs to happen urgently inside our schools. We need to start now. And in the end, this is the very definition of leadership. I love the leadership that you all show in founding your schools, in growing your schools, in growing the impact of your schools. And I love the leadership of the theme of this conference, and that's why I was keen to be able to come. Extend that leadership into your schools to help drive the change and use the flexibility that you have as private schools so that you can continue to be an inspiration for the rest of us in the regulated, publicly funded area, and we can see what works and hopefully change the regulations to deliver the change for everybody. Thank you very much. Questions or comments, or are we're constrained for time? You want to move on?
No, we can take a few questions.
Okay. Any questions, anything, or any comments, or any criticism? Yes, sir.
What are the specific changes as leaders you think we can immediately do over the next 6 months?
Specific changes over the next 6 months or so? Well, look, I think you'll have been immersed in these few days in thinking about AI. If you're not thinking about that already, you need to, one, have a strategy as to what you're going to do about that. Include within that strategy what you're going to do about developing teacher training so that they are confident around that. When thinking about AI, appreciate that it's not all about technology, that you've got to give space for our young people to have times when they're digitally free and sort of detoxing digitally, spending time in nature, spending time in the real world, and switching off. So balance that, all of that through. And then finally, talk to young people themselves. If you don't already have full pupil engagement, people talk about pupil voice. I don't think pupil voice is enough. You can give them a voice and still not hear. So empower them. Empower children so that they feel like they do have a stake, that they are interested in coming to school. There are things that they can do. They can deliver social good in their community. You can empower them to do that. Work out what you're willing to cede to the young people. Listen to them and give them a chance to get on with it. And you will learn a lot. Any more?
Thank you very much indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together to thank Lord Jim Knight for that wonderful session we had from him. And before we move ahead, first and foremost, on behalf of the organizers, we would like to say sorry to all of you for the delay that we had, but that was primarily because the Honorable Minister, sir, got stuck in some very important meeting and could not be here in time. And moving on, we would like to inform this is not all. We have much more excitement coming up through the day. We have a session coming up by Mr. Richard Kulata. We have a special message from Sri Sri Ravi Shankar, the Gurudev. And we have a very interesting topic and speech by Sri Gurcharan Das, who is a very well-known, renowned author. And The icing on the cake, ladies and gentlemen, is in the valedictory session, that is the final session. We have a recent Air Force officer who went to space. He's already here, astronaut Group Captain Subhanshu Shukla. He will be joining us for the closing session. So we would really request all of you to kindly stay back till the end of the day, as we have something very interesting lined up for all of you. And ladies and gentlemen, we will now break for lunch. And we invite all of you to join us for lunch served on the first floor. The lunch break will be of 30 minutes. We request all of you to kindly be back in time for the next keynote session. Thank you.